Hello, assessment feedback. In this video, I'm going to explain a really super simple, it's easy to say, a super simple system that will work under any circumstances at online or offline. If you want to know more information, there's an article, Hello World, issue 12. If you don't have the magazine, download the magazine from the Hello World website, or you could go to exa.foundation/press and you'll find it there. So I'm going to describe the approach here as quickly and concisely as I can. Then just ask me any questions and I'll answer them after. I am going to refer to exercise books. You know, these things at our school, we went back to exercise books just because it saved us time, not just the teachers, but the students as well. I'm not going to try and convince you now to use exercise books in this video or even discuss the most appropriate use of technology. We're here to talk assessment feedback. Now, when I was trying to solve this problem, I found thinking about the government's approach to managing vehicle safety was a good idea. So you'll know in the UK, vehicles regularly have to pass an MOT. So it's a list of the minimum standards that vehicles have to meet to be safe on public roads. When a car passes an MOT, that's not to say that this car is a good car or a bad car or a fast car or it's a good investment. It's just basically saying it meets the minimum standards for road safety. So based on that approach, I'd suggest you create a list of shared criteria, share it with your students, of minimum standards that they have to meet to comply with your expectations. And to keep it easy, you're going to go for 3 points for Key Stage 3, 5 points for Key Stage 4. Don't overcomplicate it. It's very easy to overcomplicate it. You add one extra point in, it's just multiplied levels of challenge and difficulty and workload. So what happens is every time you collect a piece of work, you award the students a score based on their satisfactory completion of those standards. Completion, standards, they're the two main principles that this approach is based on. Now, when you first set the system up, plan to use it, but then review it after a few weeks. Then after you've made a few preliminary changes, you'll find this will become your go-to system and you'll never go back to the old ways of doing it. I've had this conversation with lots of teachers before. Nobody's doing it exactly the way I suggest to begin with. Everybody starts off that way and then they end up crafting, developing their own approach. When you've done it a few times, you'll see you can typically mark 60 assignments in 15 minutes. So I used to mark 2 sets of work in a break time of 20 minutes and still have time for, you know, comfort break and that sort of thing. So that's like 2 per student in a class. I have tried doing this electronically, but you know what, all the opening and closing files, that really slowed me down. So if you're doing it that way, you know, for remote learning, you'll have to find ways of making that faster, the opening and closing thing. I found in practice, it's about 5 to 10 seconds per piece of work. Once you've done 20 pieces, you could just glance and you can tell straight away, and so can the students. So you'll be able to go, 0, 1, 2, 3, or whatever. So let me describe. So here's the criteria I'm suggesting for Key Stage 3. So my Key Stage 3, deliberately we kept the exercise books small. Okay. 0, you turn the page, there's nothing there. So zilch, no content, no submission, they just get a 0. No excuses, nothing, it's just a 0. For 1 point, a page has to be correctly titled. So for me, it had to have the date in full, title. You can decide what that is, but if it wasn't underlined, they didn't meet the standard. So it had to have the title, underlined date. Obviously, if this is electronic, then you're going to have to make that suit what you're doing. If you're doing paper-based, they can still supply these electronic. It could just be an image, a photo of their offline work. Okay. Second point, so we talked about 0, 1. Second point, you're going to give them a point if there's some content. That page there, ladies and gentlemen, has some content on it. So that would get 1 point, not even having to read it. And then for the third point, it had to be high quality. Now, you can decide what's high quality. I just say for me, they've done more than the minimum. So it could include a labeled diagram, some clearly reasoned points. Now, for this rapid system, I told them literacy, although it is important, it's not important for this. I wouldn't be assessing literacy on these. I made it clear, okay, how I was about that. Now you might do that differently. Remember, I'm trying to describe a fast, easy system, not an award-winning one. We did assess literacy, but that's a different thing for another day. Now, you can tell all your students, for example, that your minimum expected score is 2. So you don't mind if they don't get 3. You can tell them 2's good, 3's great. If you get a straight line of 3s, well, that's brilliant. That's amazing. They can't get 4s or 5s at Key Stage 3. You might allow them to resubmit once only. So if they get a 2 and they were just an underline away from 3, you could allow them one chance to resubmit. You don't want students coming up to you time and time. Will you remark it? Will you remark it? You used to tell them you only do that once. Personally, I think the points-based system works best. So no title, some content, they get a 1. Some teachers have gone for RAG, red, amber, green. That gets really, really complicated because there's a green if there's a title, but it's not underlined. I just go for numbers. What you can do, at the point of your data collection, if you put that into a spreadsheet or something like that, you can have conditional formatting. So you could say 2 is a green of one color. You could have an even super green or a star or gold or something like that if they get the 3. Now, the only difference for Key Stage 4, so the exercise books that I was using were bigger for Key Stage 4 because we expect more work. It was a 5-point system. So the 1, 2, and 3 would read just slightly differently. For a 4th point, they had to have diagrams, and you could say they have to be labeled or sketches to illustrate or demonstrate a deeper level of understanding. And then the 5th one would be to have some vocabulary on there, clearly highlighted and defined. Now, this student hasn't highlighted underlined vocabulary, so they only scored a 4. Okay, now we're nearly there. So there are other longer assessments that you would use, more sort of an end of term assessment, half-term assessment. And these were based on exam papers. So they'd be less frequent because there's a lot more work for me to do in a marking exam paper. But you asked me for a fast, frequent assessment system, and there you go.